Clint, now you're gonna feel a little discombobulated from the chrono shift. Don't worry about it.
Wait a second. Let me ask you something. If we can do this, go back in time, why don't we just find baby Thanos, and...
First of all, that's horrible.
It's Thanos.
And secondly, time doesn't work that way. Changing the past doesn't change the future.
Look, we go back, we get the stones before Thanos gets them. Thanos doesn't have the stones. Problem solved.
Bingo.
That's not how it works.
Well, that's what I heard.
Wait, but who? Who told you that?
Star Trek, Terminator, Time Cop, Time After Time.
Quantum Leap.
Wrinkle in Time, Somewhere in Time.
Hot Tub Time Machine.
Hot Tub Time Machine. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Basically any movie that deals with time travel.
Die Hard.
Hello and welcome back to A Stark Contrast, where we discuss the differences and similarities from Marvel Comics to their MCU counterparts. And we are your hosts, Geoffrey
And Dai.
Hello, and welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, especially from Coachella.
Oh, yes. I did that intro, and as I was reading it, it felt like I haven't been back in like in months.
It's been 2 weeks.
And I know, the same amount of time in between each episode. But yeah.
Gosh. Yeah.
If my voice sounds a little groggy today, guys, it's because, yes, I just came back from Coachella this past weekend 1.
And you had a great time.
Great time.
That's the thing.
Amazing
it's the
time.
indicator of
if
a great
any
time.
of our listeners kept up with Coachella and they know what it went through this past weekend and all the drama.
No doubt.
Yeah, it was just confusing in person. I
bet.
Yeah, but it was fun. Great
Yeah.
time. Glad to be back. Mm-hmm. Now my body's slowly recovering this week because it needs to prepare for the premiere
Of Guardians of the Galaxy.
3.
Well, so here's the thing. We've not yet gotten access to the premiere.
The disrespect, honestly, like
I know. How
do
dare
they not know who we are?
Don't they know?
I'm just kidding.
Truly. So Guardians is coming up real quick.
Yeah.
All the promos are out there. Speaking of Coachella and Guardians, Geoffrey stopped by their amazing pop-up activation.
Nowhere,
which seemed pretty cool.
It was really cool. It was a super cool pop-up.
Yeah.
I remember I was telling you and you were saying that you were reading online that people are like disappointed
people are
of it.
lackluster. Yeah, they're like,
And I'm like,
"Ooh."
well, I don't think it's made to be like this whole interactive thing.
No,
it's
not
just
at
supposed to
all.
be like a quick pit stop.
Sure. Yeah.
Grab some free gear, see some cool props. And it was
Yeah.
really cool. There was a photo booth, free
I
photo.
know. Did you do the
Yeah,
photo
we did.
booth? Oh, okay. I
We
was like, I didn't see the picture, but yeah.
Oh yeah,
cool.
Sam and I did it twice.
Oh,
I think
good.
Sam has because it was only printouts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she
Yeah.
has those.
That's cool.
But then just all the free swag.
Yeah.
Like Dai made a post on our Instagram.
On our
'Cause I,
Instagram.
as soon as when I got there, I was like, oh, I'm gonna grab content. I need to take pictures. I'm gonna send it to Dai immediately.
Yeah. Perfect.
and then, super cool. It was pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Seeing all the props. There was Thanos's double-sided blade.
Yeah. I forgot what it's called. It's it's a sick blade.
The blasters.
Yeah.
Bunch of cool little like Easter eggs. The Walkman's in there.
Yeah.
Cosmo chilling.
Yondu and Kraglin's mohawk thing.
The fin.
Yeah, the fin. Yeah.
It was really cool with also them outside in the suits. We got reposted by Marvel.
That was pretty cool. I didn't expect that because, as what happens sometimes, we just get notification. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. But it was nonstop, and I was like, "What happened?"
My face was on Marvel Studios' story.
Yeah.
That was kind of
and
insane.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh my god!
So
Yeah,
you
I
got
screenshotted
doubled.
that immediately.
Oh yeah, I know.
was
I
like,
saved
oh.
them both. I was like, "Oh yes," and then they doubled down and did it on Twitter as well, which is really cool. So I was like, "All right, Senpai noticed us. It was good. It was good."
Yeah. Planting the seeds. You know?
Yeah, right. But that's really awesome. I quite honestly, I almost drove out there myself just to go see it, just because I'm that person. But thankfully, Jeff brought back all this cool stuff. And so, yeah, for those who aren't familiar with what they were giving away, there's like a giant glowy ring thing.
Yeah, so basically it's a pit stop on
Yeah.
your way to Coachella, and it's basically
Yeah.
the free stuff and the free swag is basically things
Yeah.
that'll kind of prepare you for
Yeah.
like the dust and the wind and the heat
Yeah.
or just to like help you at festivals. So
Yeah.
they got bandanas, they had sunglasses, they had earbuds.
Yeah, earbuds.
And then a glow light thingy to kind of help you be seen at night or be
That's
found
cool.
at night.
Yeah, it's really cool. And the bandanas come in different colors, which are representational of the suits that they wear, both in the trailer and on site, on that little activation site. So that's really cool.
Have you watched any of the official clips?
That's hilarious. No, of course not. I'm still saving. Even right now, as they're doing their press tour, I've not watched anything because I'm just like, something's going to happen. I'm going to hear or see something that is complete giveaway of what happens.
Sure.
And I'm going to be ruined. So I'm really playing it safe. But it's really nice to see that Palm and Chris Pratt and Karen are kind of taking the helm as far as this tour goes so far. I'm hoping Zoe will join in at some point, but it looks like it's going to be just those three.
I can't wait to see who pops up at the Hollywood premiere.
At the premiere, yeah. So back to that, we're going to see the film on opening night at the fan event at the El Capitan. So hopefully they'll bring in some special guests there. Really really excited for that. You know what else is Guardians related? I don't know if you saw this, but I complained about this on social media too, was that the HelloFresh collaboration. So they dropped, I don't know, somebody responded to me that they released 167 boxes of these very special Guardians of the Galaxy themed HelloFresh boxes. And they were quite literally gone in 1 minute. I went on at 9 a.m. and I was like, oh, refreshed. I was filling in my information and it was like, sorry, you just missed out. And I was like,
that's insane.
it was 47 seconds. You know what I mean? So there are 2 more weeks. So if you want to try and you're listening to this episode, be sure to log on to HelloFreshAdventure.com, I believe. And they're giving away boxes this coming Monday, as well as the Monday of the movie release week. So 9 a.m. drop. I guess they're free. I don't know. I'm not sure if they're free or if you have to pay for them. But yeah, they're very limited from what you can tell. And they come with all this cool movie related, recipes and swag and snacks and stuff. So good luck. But what I wanted to say that I was excited for was that, Jeff, did you realize it's our 2nd anniversary?
Oh, it's April. Oh my gosh.
Isn't it wild? Happy anniversary.
Oh my God. 2 years?
2 years.
Whoa.
Congrats.
That's awesome.
Isn't
Hell
that
yeah,
crazy?
dude.
Yeah. So happy anniversary. I wanted to make sure to say that. And like semi-related but related and not related, we do have some awesome news to share finally. But only our Patreon patrons know right now. Like I shared it with them a couple of days ago over the weekend. So if you'd like to know ahead of the game, please join our Patreon patron circle. Otherwise, you're just going to have to wait until our next episode to find out.
Sorry.
But it's going to be a pretty good time. Let's just say that. And then, before we get into today's episode, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is officially available digitally.
Woo.
So that's out in the world. If you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and check it out. Also, the Marvels teaser trailer dropped.
Exciting.
Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Looks very cool.
I think it is also Brie Larson's year again because she has this, and then she also has the Fast and the Furious 10
is she
movie.
in that?
Yeah, she is.
I knew she was in like a couple of them, but
Yeah,
I have no scope of that.
I enjoy it. What do you think about it?
Is she a bad guy or a good guy
Oh, in
Fast and Furious?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know yet.
Because Charlize Theron,
Yes.
isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
What do you
she's a
think?
bad guy.
What did you think about the Marvels trailer?
I loved the trailer. Like I unexpectedly loved it. Like I wasn't honestly sure what to expect at all. Like I honestly wasn't sure that we would see all 3 of them, let alone
together,
and then the answers that we were questioning.
Yeah.
Like, before, like the Kamala thing. Why are they changing places? All that
Yeah.
good stuff. Like they very seamlessly kind of gave you the answer. Like, okay, here's Monica. Here's what she's doing. She's working with Nick in space, and then boom, boom, boom. They're all triangulating.
Yeah.
And synced up somehow per their powers.
So good.
And so they're switching places. And then we got a first look at Zoe Ashton.
Yes.
As a Kree soldier of some sort.
Yes.
So she looks amazing. Very much like her partner. She was giving off some Loki vibes, which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, ooh, I wonder if they'll ever share screen time together. But yeah, it looks fantastic. Really excited. It's kind of wild that that's just a teaser trailer.
I know.
and
So we're not
even a
going to see anything
full-fledged.
for another maybe couple months.
Couple of months at least, yeah, because they have to do like a halfway point to November, so that's when it's really gonna
and
get
then
crazy.
because after Guardians,
Yep.
it's gonna be a Secret Invasion.
Secret Invasion, yeah.
like promo.
Yeah.
Then maybe after that runs its course.
Yep.
Then maybe it's Marvel stuff,
Exactly. And that's
Crazy.
not counting all the other Disney Plus drops that might
which
happen.
I still forget that what is happening. But yeah,
Yeah, it's gonna be wild. So get ready for summer. That's really, really fun and exciting stuff. So that said, we can roll into today's character study. But before that, of course, we're not experts. We don't claim to be. We're just a couple of nerds nerding out. So for today, we're taking it back all the way to Iron Man and that circle of characters and revisiting somebody who's been there since like really the dawning of the MCU. And that, of course, is James Rhodes, otherwise known as War Machine.
woo!
And so it's funny because I'm jumping into this almost immediately. There's a very distinct way of saying War Machine, which I just did, which is reminiscent of what he sounded like in the cartoon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he would, like, every time they came on screen, they would like announce themselves and he would be like War Machine. And it was James Avery, who was Uncle Phil, and maybe I remember taking it back to our first episode
Wow.
where I misnamed him as Uncle Carl
Yes,
with such conviction.
I remember that.
But yes, so James Avery was his voice, and so he used to have this very broad, like,
Yes.
War Machine.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So I'm not gonna try and say it all the time, but yeah. So War Machine, we're gonna dive into this character, very beloved in his own right. Originally created by John Byrne, David Michelini, and Bob Layton. In his first appearance, I'm gonna have you guess the cover price. Let me put my finger over this. But here's the cover of the first comic that features War Machine. He is not on the
Oh my
cover.
gosh.
It is Tony Stark
Yeah.
diving out of a helicarrier, trying to pull together his suit.
Yeah.
So before we get into the suit, the cover details, do you want to give a stab at the cover price first?
Oh, you're covering it.
Yeah, I'm covering.
Okay. What was my last one? I think
So-
it's like 12 cents or whatever.
Yes, 12 cents was 1963 for X-Men #1. And so this is Iron Man 118, cover dated October 1978. So it's 15 years later.
Gosh. I'm going to go 20 cents.
Not bad. It is unfortunately a bit off.
These comments.
35
Oh my
cents.
God. Inflation.
Yeah, right. 35
cents.
cents. So you could pick this up for 35 cents back in the day. And so this is an interesting cover though, because I saw your immediate curiosity. You're like, what is happening?
I'm like, where is he?
And also, is it because of the suit being in a briefcase?
Yeah.
And he's like, so back in the day, very quickly, Tony had to physically put on each piece of his suit.
Oh, yeah.
And so he would have to slide on the gloves and put on the chest plate, and it's
We love that.
yeah, it's very 2.0.
We love that.
So that's what's happening there. But yeah, so this comic in particular, it does skew on a cheaper side of things for first appearance. Mostly in part because this is just James Rhodes. It's
Yeah.
not War Machine. It's not etc. All the other stuff we're going to talk about shortly. But so this book on Shortbox goes for $425 for Rhodey's first appearance at a CGC 9.4,
Oh my gosh.
which is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty great. It's almost like new. Whereas on eBay, a CGC 9.8 is about $900. So
Almost double.
0.4 points higher, double the price.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Whereas the lowest CGC 8.0, which is still fantastic. That was the lowest I could find. $80, both on eBay and Shortbox for the same grade. So if you're looking for a pretty decent copy of this appearance and you love Rhodey, I mean, $80 is nothing to laugh at. And then, of course, there are a couple of Lucy's out there for about $200, which is interesting. I don't know that logic, but maybe that person doesn't realize that you can get a graded version
Yeah.
for so much cheaper. As the question of questions, when was your first exposure to the character?
Iron Man 1.
I was gonna say, I was like, what?
Oh, because I had Don Cheadle just imprinted in my mind.
I know. That's
So,
gonna be a
yes.
discussion in itself.
So yeah, young Terrence Howard,
Yeah.
Next time, baby.
So I did almost identical to what I did for Professor Xavier, which is our last episode, number 52. I went in going, I'm just gonna watch 1 and 2. I'll be good. No, I watched all 3 because of course.
Yeah.
And you're right. I will give it to you. 3 is not as bad as I thought it was. Like I realize now that I remembered things very like subjectively, right? Like I remembered parts of it and I didn't love those parts, but the rest of the movie I actually do like.
And
a
also,
lot.
if you think about it, it's like at the core of it, it's Tony having severe mental health issues.
It is. It's so much darker
it's
in retrospect.
very severe, man.
Yeah. And so we're gonna dabble a bit in that talk as well throughout this episode. But revisiting all 3 in succession, and I didn't go off course and watch the other stuff, but I thought, they were all very good movies. All 3 of them were very good.
Number 3 is remind me. It's the one with.
That's the Christmas one with the
Christmas
little
one,
kid.
little kitty. Like, oh yeah. Oh, he gets
Yeah.
shot out the air. He ends up in this small town. The kid brings him up. Yeah.
And it stands out a little bit more than the previous 2 because the first 2 were more like machine based, and this third one was more of like they're mutating people, and say that they had those people that were human bombs.
Oh, the Killian stuff,
yes.
right?
And so the people were blowing up all over the place.
I think
and
that's
Mandarin.
where people.
Yeah.
It was the whole Mandarin thing too.
It was definitely
like,
the Mandarin. Yeah, it was 100% the Mandarin thing for me. I remember so distinctly, like when I was sitting in that theater and he popped up as Sir Ben Kingsley. I was like, wait, what? And then he was like, oh, I'm just an actor.
I'm just an actor.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And of course, we've talked about this in our Shang-Chi episode, so that all is well there. But yeah, it was an interesting rewatch. But for me, sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, I think it's a fun movie. Like
Yeah.
I think I've rewatched it a couple times in the past. And like, oh, this is fun. It gave me one of like my favorite scenes ever. It's when he calls the house party protocol.
Yeah.
I can't believe I remember that. Holy crap. The house party protocol.
You
And
have
then-
a keen sense for all the Iron Man stuff, I realize.
I mean, he is my fave.
Yeah.
And then Tony gets into a suit, comes to him. He T modes it.
Yeah.
T poses it.
Yeah.
And then Rhodey's like, oh yeah, what about me? And he T poses, and then he's like, sorry, buddy, they're all programmed to me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great that you remember that because we're actually going to talk about something very related to that in just a few minutes. But yeah, for me, the first exposure to the character, I could not remember if it was perhaps the Marvel superhero video game, the trading cards, or the cartoon. Because the cartoon came around 93, 4, or 5, which is on the heels of the X-Men one.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's like pretty ingrained in my brain from that point. So it's a bit of those around that time. But yeah, like again, the cartoon really influenced me for the character because he was like the sub character. It was Tony and Rhodey, and then the other characters just kind of in and out. They had Mandarin, I think. I don't even think Pepper was in it. I can't remember, to be honest, but it was very much about those two guys. And so the trading card that I have here, I only have a couple. One of which is the 94 Hildebrandt Brothers Marvel Masterpieces. And this was something very funny because like back in the day, I'm showing Jeff 2 seemingly identical cards. Back in the day, this was like, okay, cool, you got a card, great. And so they started to do this thing where they would incentivize, like you could get a signature series version. And so they've just etched the artists' signatures into the card. And it used to be such a big deal, dude. And so
That's how they get you.
I know, and I have 2 of these for War Machine, but on the one I'm actually going to read, this is, do they list the artist? I don't think they do. And it is Joe Jusko Oh, this is the Joe Drusco set. So let's see how much this resonates with you, Jeff. So, War Machine, real name, James Rhodes. Group affiliation, Avengers West Coast. When death seemed imminent for Tony Stark, the man inside the Iron Man armor, he feared the world would be without the technological hero's protection. So he created a new suit of battle armor for his friend and longtime associate Jim Rhodes, so that Rhodes might carry on responsibilities of Iron Man. But Rhodes soon carved out his own legend as the unstoppable War Machine. And now with Stark's recovery, there are 2 Iron Warriors to protect the planet.
Interesting.
And then at the very, very bottom of this card, it says, in the beginning, ... Jim Rhodes substituted as Iron Man for a time while Tony Stark was incapacitated.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a stark difference right there, right off the
Yeah.
bat. And so as we get into this, all about James Rupert Jim Rhodey Rhodes.
Oh my gosh.
It's a mouthful. Rupert.
JRJRJ.
Yeah, J.R.R. Jar Jar. Junior.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so Rupert. I don't know where... They really emphasize Rupert for some reason, which is really funny to me. I'm like, hey.
Rupert.
And so when we're first introduced to Rhodey in the books, it's truly a fragment of a cameo. And so I have it here for you. He literally only has one speech bubble.
Uh-huh.
And so this is Rhodes right here.
Yeah.
And all he says is this one bubble. So do you want to read it?
On raring to go. On raring to go, Mr. Stark. Just give me a minute to grab a thermos of coffee. And is this guy from the South?
I don't know.
Like, where
right?
is he supposed to be from?
The inflection is implied there. And so, yeah, he's introduced as Tony's personal pilot when we first meet him here.
Got it.
Which I feel is incredibly different from when we first meet him in the MCU.
Oh, I can tell you exactly. Oh, I keep thinking of Don Cheadle's entrance. Dang it.
So, of course, the original Rhodey in the MCU is first portrayed by Terrence Howard. And then, of course, after and more prominently, by Don Cheadle. Was he in his Air Force suit? Yeah, he was. And he's already established that he is serving and he is familiar with Stark. They have these dealings because Stark is an arms dealer of sorts.
Basically, he creates
weapons.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, and so they're linked up from the get just because of that.
Yeah.
So in the comics, it's very different. It's like he's part of his. He's a pilot. He's his personal pilot. He's his chauffeur and sorts, right? And so it's later clarified that Rhodey is an aviator engineer for Stark Industries, as well as a seasoned, successful military pilot. So he's got they're slowly establishing, okay, so he's not just some helicopter driver. He is very much a man that has a background that's definitely like of quality, of experience. And so... an especially interesting facet about the character in the books is that, while people know him as War Machine, like they just expect like, oh, he's War Machine. Like the card mentioned, he was actually Iron Man first. So when Rhodey debuted, it was 118 in October of 1978. And then he becomes Iron Man in Iron Man 169, cover dated April 1983, about 5 years after he made his first debut here in this one panel. And so it's during this part of Tony's story where he is debilitated, he's incapacitated in many ways. And so Rhodey is kind of dealt with like a crisis situation where he's like, I got to do something. Yeah. And so he puts on the armor and it's a cliffhanger. So at the end of 169, he's holding the helmet over his head. So here's the cover of 170 and they're like, oh, who is it? And it's Rhodey. What? And so it's not official until 170 that he actually takes on the tenure of becoming Iron Man. And so, going back to what you had said earlier about, Iron Man 3 being really like Tony's journey and kind of breakdown of a normal functioning human being. Like it really is about his struggle with alcohol and depression and PTSD. That was very much from the comics as well. There's this short 9-issue mini arc in the books that was called referred to as Demon in a Bottle. And so they very much pulled a lot of those elements from the comics put them into the movies into different ways. And it was especially during this time where Rhodey was kind of taking on the duties for Tony because he just couldn't do it. And so a lot of, I don't know if I have screenshots here, but a lot of the panels, I mean, it's just really like Rhodey is struggling to be Iron Man as much as Tony is struggling to just be Tony Stark. And it's really unfortunate, but you do see parts of that Tony in the Robert Downey Jr. version where he's quippy, but you can tell he's full of like pain and he's like, I can't do this. I can't be Iron Man anymore. I can't do this. And he almost faces that in every movie, right? Because he has to upgrade the arc reactor and then, you know, all that good stuff. But for Rhodey in the books, you know, his time as Iron Man was cut short because like you mentioned just here with you know, the T-pose, he couldn't calibrate with the system in the comics because it's all formatted for Tony. Yeah, so he has the same problem. So I'm like, geez, man, when you watch the movies, they really did, like, even if it's a small sliver of an Easter egg, it's still there, and it's very much reflective of the comic. And so Rhodey started to get these really bad headaches in the comics where he almost couldn't function not only in the suit but in everyday life. And so he had to stop. He had to stop being Iron Man, if you will. And so, you know, like Tony refused to take back the suit. He felt like it was ruining his life. He was like, no, you're better at it. You can do it. You can do it. And he, you know, meanwhile, Tony's like guzzling, you know, whiskey and alcohol and all that stuff, vodka, what have you. Poor guy. And it's so literal in the comic books. Like he literally has a bottle in his hand throughout these moments. And so, but anyway, he's on the mend, and he tells Rhodey, like, you know, you got to do this. I can't do it. And so Rhodey, and he kind of leans into it. He's like, sure, I'll give it a chance again. And then, you know, Tony then refers him to get help from Dr. Hank Pym. And so it's like all these collaborative efforts that start to weave in. And so imagining Michael Douglas helping, you know, Don Cheadle or Terrence Howard as they're going through the motions of Iron Man. And so ultimately Tony becomes Iron Man once again. But as you might have seen in the screenshot, an untimely quote unquote death or assassination leaves Rhodey to once again take on the helm. And so there was this huge storyline where Tony was seemingly killed. It left everybody in shambles. The business was in shambles. So Rhodey was kind of grandfathered into the position of like, okay, well, you're his number one on the will and everything. He left everything to you.
Wow. So
he had to take it over. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But long story short, you know, that the armor was a point of contention for both of Rhodey and Tony, one way or another, and especially with each other. Like it almost started to weaponize what they would say to each other. Like Rhodey would be very kind of, you know, disgruntled and almost like annoyed that he had to take this on because Tony was such a F up. You know what I mean? And so eventually Rhodey just splinters off on his own altogether, and then he takes the War Machine armor as well, and that's when he really becomes his own hero as War Machine. And so War Machine debuted 10 years after Rhodey became Iron Man, and that's 15 years after he made his debut.
Oh my god.
And so he becomes War Machine in Avengers West Coast number 94. That one, I did a quick price check. It goes for about $75 for a 9.4. Still not as much as I expected, to be honest. And then a whopping $700 if you want it signed by, or if you want it pre-signed by Don Cheadle. There's one signed by Don Cheadle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, signature series version for $700. So bumps it up 10 times if it's signed by him, which is kind of funny because usually that's not the case. But yeah, so that's basically Rhodey in the comics.
Wow,
in a nutshell.
that is very like different because I was gonna say how Rhodey and MCU came to be in the MCU.
Yeah,
I feel like he just kind of came into it. Like he was a friend of Tony's, but he was not like his right hand man.
Yeah.
Like his friend for sure, close friend for sure, but never had intentions of like.
Very professional.
I think that's maybe where they draw the parallels. Like they didn't want to come in. They didn't want to come into it, but they just found themselves into it.
Exactly.
Because now I have to help my friend out.
Yeah.
And so
it's kind of funny, right? He has to. He's like, Tony, there goes Tony again, and he's like, well, I'm just gonna have to bail him out again.
Yeah.
In his own way.
Especially that scene in Iron Man 2, I believe, like when they have that drunk fight in Tony Stark's house.
Yeah.
And you have DJ AM DJing, R.I.P.
Right. I was like, I forgot he was in this movie.
Yeah. And then he's like, Tony, take off this suit. He's like, no, you first. And then he's like,
yep. I love that sound.
It's like a poor man's
I love it.
pulsar sound right there.
Yeah, and that was actually, it was a pretty memorable moment too, because like it's, we saw a glimpse of that suit, or what we believe is that suit, in Iron Man 1 with Terrence Howard, and just like you said,
Next time, baby.
And so you finally see Rhodey wearing it in Iron Man 2 during that scene, and it is a very like dressed down version of the Iron Man suit, which is basically, it's all silver. So it's very like, it's a model before the model. I think it's officially Mark II. In Iron Man 2. And so so of course, doubling back, portrayed first by Terrence Howard and then Don Cheadle, first seen in Iron Man 2008. Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. So how many years?
That is about 15.
15 years. So he's going into the 15 now.
Well, he's a legacy character now.
And he's a legacy character, yeah. And so we last saw Rhodey, which I thought was funny because I didn't really think about this until I was doing this homework. Last seen in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, 2021.
Was it?
Yeah. That was his last cameo. Didn't he win an award?
For best cameo.
He was like, I was on screen for 2 minutes.
He's like,
and he
all right.
won an Emmy. And that was the only Emmy that series got.
Was it an Emmy? I think it was like one of those smaller awards. A very small, small like award.
The fact that he won,
but like it's hilarious that he was just nominated.
Yeah, he was like, what?
He's like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. And
really,
so,
that was the last one.
That was the last one, unless you want to count the trailer for Secret Invasion.
Okay, that's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's probably, I know. I was like, now his brain is thinking of something. Yeah, it was the trailer for Secret Invasion. So let's take it back a little bit. So how did you like, or did you at all enjoy Terrence Howard as Rhodey, the character? How were the differences to you?
I think I liked his personality as Colonel Rhodes for sure.
Terrence,
yes. Now that I think about it, because I think I've thought about this before, of like Terrence as Rhodey. I liked him as Rhodey. Yeah. But then, I mean, maybe this is like recency bias, and like now I can't see him ever kind of playing that role in the suit. Yeah. Like when I imagine his face in that UI like helmet stuff. Yeah. I don't think I could like see myself him interacting in that way and having those quips. Yeah. And like the acting in that space. Yeah. I'm not saying he's not a bad actor, but I just don't see him in there.
100%.
So
I feel the same.
Yeah. I think he makes a good Rhodes. Yeah. And it was great too. Like you see that in Iron Man 1 for sure. But to have the physicality of War Machine, I don't know if I could see that.
It's interesting, right? Yeah. And it's even something at the time watching one and then being introduced to this new Rhodey almost instantaneously in number 2, where he comes into the courtroom.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's a different man. As a completely different actor. It is interesting to think back and like thinking, oh, Terrence Howard did such a great job. But then when you're introduced to Don Cheadle, who is like, they're night and day as actors come, right?
Yeah.
Terrence has a very like, I don't want to say lighthearted, but he's a little less, he's more slack than Don Cheadle is, at least when it comes to this role. Like Terrence almost felt like a party version of Rhodey.
Sure.
No, because he didn't even skew younger to me. He just felt a little more loose.
Sure.
Overall. And so I feel like Don Cheadle as Rhodey and as an actor kind of has this like refined bravado about him where he's sophisticated, but he can still be funny, and he can do the Thanos bit, like choking out a small, tiny mad titan and it'd still be as funny as he can be super duper serious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I had the same thought of like, God, what would have Terrence Howard look like, you know, pulling up, if you see the metal comes up and you see him in the full scale or inside the helmet. Yeah, I couldn't.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine it very well.
I can't.
And I'll tell you, even reading these comics, because at first, when I first rewatched Iron Man 1, I was like, you know, like Terrence did an incredible job. He does really feel like comic book Rhodey, especially when it comes to the 80s, 90s version. But I found myself, the more I read, the more I heard Don Cheadle.
Sure.
Like in every panel,
That's
heard
fair.
Don Cheadle.
Yeah.
I was like, and you know, I don't know. I don't want to say he's better, but I just feel like Don Cheadle
just took over the role.
Yeah, he really did. So the last time we saw him was the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But real quick, let's go through the key moments. So he's introduced as Colonel Rhodes, which is Terrence Howard's role. He played a much bigger role in Iron Man 2, as we saw. And somewhere in between the films, he's promoted from Lieutenant Colonel to straight up Colonel.
Yeah.
So so that happens, I guess, from the success of the first film or whatever. And like he got promoted. And then there's Civil War, of course, which the whole, you know, Stark versus
the Accords
Cap
thing.
And then the Vision issue and him being, you know, grounded, shot out of the sky. And then, you know, like spinal injury.
Yeah.
Which leads to him being paralyzed for a bit and then recuperating by the end of the film.
Yeah.
And then, of course, later he's then a survivor of the snap when it comes to Thanos. And he's he was a survivor. So he aged the 5 years. To then seeing him where we last saw him, Falcon and Winter Soldier, he's in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington with Sam.
Crazy.
Yeah, so, and it is interesting. He's always been in this professional. He's always in his Air Force suit.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Fixing other people's problems left and right. And always being that like voice.
Yes, exactly. The voice thing.
Yeah, he's always the voice and the vote of confidence, I feel, for a lot of characters. Do you have any favorite moments between any of those films? Like, what is your prime War Machine moment?
Oh, Iron Man 2, easily in the dome.
Yeah.
When they fight the robots.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And I think that moment too, and it was really good because they say it on Twitter too, of like that moment was really good. There was no music playing; it was just them fighting the robots.
Yeah.
And then
it's all that metal ASMR.
The guns.
Cling,
and he's like, "Oh, nice. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you like that?" And it's like, "Oh, that's really fun." And then and then Tony's like, "Rhodey, get down," and he lasers all of them in one go.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "You couldn't start with that." He's like, "Sorry, buddy, it's a one-time use."
And those are moments, especially those movies are like moments that made me think, God, I miss Tony Stark.
Yeah, 100%.
Really miss Tony Stark. He was fantastic, but he was too good. You know what I mean? Like, to have him keep going.
Yeah,
he's just too good.
He had to go.
He had
to die, people. He had to die.
Oh my God.
I said what I said. And I will die on this hill. Much like Natasha Romanoff. Boom!
Oh my god, he threw in a Vormir joke.
The chaos.
Yes.
Ah.
You're Elmo in the fire. Oh god. So from there, we're gonna jump into powers and paraphernalia. And so it goes without saying, Rhodey is completely 100% a natural human being in both the comics as well as in the films. But he's very much also an experienced Marine, trained in both armed and unarmed combat, skilled aviator, and in aviation engineering. And so, yeah, like we said before, he was part of Stark's, entourage of sorts. And he piloted, and he's also part of, different aviation departments and the like. In the suit, however, War Machine has got a pretty great suite of enhancements, including but not limited to superhuman strength, speed, and durability, flight, power cells, energy conversion, power recharge. So that's that whole solar power thing that they redistribute and all that good stuff.
Got it.
Self-contained life support system and environmental protection, which is pretty rad. Didn't it resuscitate Tony at one point?
Which one?
The Iron Man, the Mark? Like, wasn't he?
Oh man.
Yeah, didn't it jumpstart his heart or something? If something.
Maybe.
God, what was that?
I forget.
Yeah. Repulsor rays, Unibeam, which is one of the favorites from the video games. Unibeam. Lasers, magnetism, which goes without saying, of course. The Gatling gun, rocket launcher, and miniature heat-seeking missiles for starters. I love the miniature missiles. That's also one of my favorite things about The Mandalorian. How they have this like tiny like pew, but then it like blows up into exponential bombastic blasts. It's pretty cool. And so, of course, while we haven't seen all of these to the T in the MCU, they're clearly present one way or another. And of course, War Machine, it's got so much more baggage to it, which we're going to roll right into aesthetic as far as that goes. And so initially in the books, Rhodey first wore the Iron Man suit, donning the Iron Man Mark IV in the comics and 2 in the MCU, like we mentioned before. And then, of course, naturally, the War Machine armor was created by Tony for use by Rhodey. So as a result, it bears unmistakable likeness to the Iron Man marks. But they're often bigger, bulkier, and slower. And so, yeah, like, in Iron Man 2, for instance, when Justin Hammer has outfitted the Iron Man mark and changed it, he's added all these heavy artillery to the suit.
It's just so obnoxious.
It's obnoxious. And it's like 100%. Like, what is this in the comics? And he's got like cannons and giant guns. And like one of the supers in Marvel vs. Capcom is like Rhodey pulls out this giant like thing and it's got like 100 missiles on it. It's a big old barrage. But yes, that's just what makes the character that and Iron Man so much more superior by a rule because he's lighter, faster, everything more powerful because War Machine's he's kind of a tank. It's a tank versus a
flying tank.
Yeah, he's literally a flying tank. So do you think you're ready for a quick pop quiz? It's not too involved.
I never am, but here we go.
It's a comic-based one, I'll tell you that much. And so do you want to take a stab at how many suits Rhodey has in the comics?
Oh man! If you guys want to go back to the first episode in Iron Man, the Iron Man episode,
GOAT.
Oh god!
Incredible.
Dai asked me how many suits does Iron Man have in the MCU,
insane.
and I got it on the money.
And you barely gave it.
And I've never been good at pop quizzes since because that was the peak.
You started out too strong. Too strong.
In the comics, how many does War Machine have?
War Machine. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So just think a little more humble. Let's just say that.
I mean, maybe humble could be like he has 5, and then I could be like the most wrong. Like Iron Man probably has like bagillions.
Yeah,
and
it's
jillions.
It's pretty.
It's hefty. It's night and day.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to throw out. I feel like it's minuscule, but I also feel like, I mean, in the comics, are they really like trying to upgrade him like every time? I'm going to go 12.
That is incorrect.
Of course it is.
Do you think it's higher or lower? Let's go there.
I think it's higher.
It's actually lower.
Ah!
You were actually closer with 5.
Wow.
Yeah, in the comics, there are only 7 War Machine marks compared to Tony's incomparable amount of
That's what I'm saying.
344.
See, it's the comic book questions that throw me off because numbers just don't exist.
Yeah, so in the comics, War Machine has several armors, some of which include the Iron Patriot armor, the Eidolon Warwear, Hollow armor, and Sentinel Squad armor, which, by the way, he was even once part cyborg in the comics, which kind of unfurled in a weird way. So what happened is that I don't think that they actually fleshed out the story, but it's almost like an in-betweener, like something happened to Rhodey. I believe it was after Civil War. He was incapacitated to the point where he lost his limbs. And so he looked like Cyborg from DC. He was outfitted with, the War Machine suit, but he had half of his face was kind of cyborged out. It was definitely a different time, but, long story short, it involved clones. It involved Norman Osborn. We've heard that song and dance before. We're not going into that. But, of course, in the MCU, we've only seen Rhodey don the Iron Patriot armor of those previously mentioned from comics, which made its debut in Iron Man 3. Mm-hmm. And then, fun fact, in the comics, the Iron Patriot suit made its debut in the Gambit series of all series.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I remember this cover very distinctly, and it's like Iron Patriot and Gambit going head to head, and I was like, what is this? And it's interesting because the Iron Patriot suit in the comics came to be at all because the movie did it. So it's one of those rare instances where they're like, oh, that's a cool idea. We're going to put it in the comics so that people will go, oh, okay, cool, great, awesome. And so if you scroll down our little doc here, I do have a picture that features all 6 of the currently known War Machine marks. Do you have a favorite of any of those?
I think it's between, the one in Iron Man 2 or Infinity War.
Oh, the Infinity War one is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think when I think of Rhodey in Infinity War, I think of when they're at the Battle of Wakanda, and he's firing at any or all people.
Yeah.
Or one of those things coming
those
in.
Space dogs.
Space dogs. Come here, space dogs. And then he's just firing. He's like, hold up, Sam.
Yeah.
I got something for you. And it's like
I'm here for the sound effects. Yeah. And the weird thing is that I barely remember even seeing this last suit as much as it's probably in there. It was just that there's so many characters that you just almost never see him specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is bulked up and stuff. So I wonder how, moving forward, are they gonna tune him down?
Yeah, like what is he gonna look like?
Yeah, what is he gonna look
and we've only seen him in human form recently.
Exactly.
So,
we've not seen him in the suit since Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
So that's kind of wild. So I know it's very quick, but this one is definitely more up your alley. Pop quiz. You ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I feel like you might have almost answered this already. When did Rhodey first officially don the War Machine armor in the MCU? And this could be a trick question.
It was in when he was saving the president, and then he was saving the president, and I think was it during Killian or whatever. Oh yeah, he's like, bring me the president. They go to that secret lair. He pops out of the suit, and it's him popping out. He does a flying punch. And then he's like, because he's putting the hand to the heart to the thing, and he's like burning him. He's like, all right, you asked for it. Bah! Am I wrong?
Isn't that Iron Man 3?
Iron Man 3, yes.
Did he not have War Machine in Iron
Was
Man 2?
Iron Man 3? Oh,
Yeah,
God.
it's Iron Man 3, I think.
So Iron Man
think.
2 was then during the fight then. The
See,
DJ
this
fight?
this is where it's a trick question. So, yes, you're right, and yes, not entirely correct.
I don't know why I get Iron Man
could be
2 and
wrong.
3 mixed up.
I mean, for War Machine, it's totally fair because I feel like it all blurs together.
Yeah.
So the Iron Man Mark II, which is the silver suit that Rhodey first wears in Iron Man 2, is during the DJ AM scene in the party, and which is again very cool. And then the official first time they actually unveil the War Machine suit is when they're having the Stark what do you call it?
Oh, the Stark Expo.
The Stark Expo, and Hammer is on stage presenting all the new drones
Yes.
that Whiplash has created. And then
Oh,
Rhodey
that's when he
comes up.
debuted. Yeah, the new War Machine. And he's like, I don't want to be here.
Pretty iconic because he was just like very unenthusiastically like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So that's technically the first time. Yeah, I think you were thinking Iron Man 3. It feels like Iron Man 3, yeah. But well done. You did most of it. Yeah. Fair. And so for Rhodey, when it comes to family, friends, and affiliations, we're not going to get too nitty-gritty with this section at all, to be perfectly honest, because you know what? They haven't really tapped into any of that stuff for Rhodey when it comes to the MCU. So, to have a balanced conversation here, I just wanted to, tackle the obvious, which is Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. We mentioned at the top of the show, Rhodey had humble beginnings as Tony's private pilot. And his importance just grew grander in this grand scheme of things, with each issue, each year. I have this screenshot that I wanted to show you. It's from the Invincible Iron Man number 144. And it's like it's a half issue. Mm-hmm. And the second half, it's like a special bonus, never before revealed, Shellhead's first adventure in Vietnam. Like he and Rhodey, you have to remember, back in the day, Iron Man and Tony Stark were not known to be the same person.
Yes.
So Iron Man was Tony Stark's, his his protector, his bodyguard of sorts. And so this story essentially takes place in Vietnam. Rhodey is on the ground. He's in the terrain. He's in the jungle, and he encounters Iron Man, and he's like, do you know if Tony's okay? And he's like, oh yes, Tony is fine.
He's the best. He's amazing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so during one part, I think Rhodey, he broke his arm and his leg, or he sprung his ankle or something. And Iron Man, instead of doing what he would do in the movies, which is like fly around with him or fix it on the spot, he's like, get on my back. I'm gonna piggyback you. So I wanted to show you this just because it's so absurd. So by this point, they're already starting to build the friendship between Iron Man and Rhodey, so that he's like trusting him.
Yes.
And then of course, like all things, Tony finally reveals like, oh, I am Iron Man. And Rhodey, very much like Don Cheadle would in the films, is like, nah, really? I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like he put it together himself.
Yeah.
And of course, Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, portrayed by Robert Downey Jr. GOAT! Per Wikipedia, Rhodey, quote unquote, flew 138 combat missions before becoming a liaison between the military's Department of Acquisitions and Stark Industries. So again, that's kind of where their meeting point is. They're running in the same groups, and I can just imagine the conversations that Tony and Rhodey would have, like, oh, come on, Rhodey. Come on, Rhodes. Just let me do this. And then Rhodes reluctantly letting Tony get away with murder, literally, unfortunately, sometimes. But yeah, their relationship in the movies is awesome. I think they did a very good job selling their friendship. Do you think Don Cheadle was better with the chemistry than Terrence Howard?
I want to agree.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Kind of like,
yeah,
unmatched, incomprehensible at this point.
I almost feel like Terrence had a combative, almost like they almost had this weird competitive vibe about them in a way that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it could be because Terrence didn't get the chance to, build that chemistry and relationship. But then I think everyone knows like the story on like why,
Tell us why, Jeff.
why Terrence Howard kind of didn't get get asked back.
Yeah.
I mean, long story short.
Yeah.
Terrence Howard wanted to get the same amount of money that RDJ was getting for playing Iron Man.
You know what was wild? Because I knew that much, right? And then the whole he got offered less for the second film, which is like, okay, well, which sucks. Like I heard he was reportedly offered 40,000 or not 40,000, 400,000 maybe. But he got more than, I was going to call him Tony. He got more than RDJ in the first film. Like RDJ got the smaller paycheck, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because
at the time, Terrence Howard is a bigger name.
Exactly.
But this was also like a redeem thing for
RDJ.
For RDJ. So if it works out, cool.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, no problem.
Okay,
it's fine.
Yeah. So I think he got 1.2 or something for the first film, and then they pulled him down to 400, and then they
that's
tripled
significant.
RDJ. So I guess that's part of the contention of it
Sure.
all. It's like that, but yeah, I think Don really nailed it.
Yeah.
And also like in a weird way seamlessly brought the chemistry together.
Yeah.
It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like...
And then it kind of comes to like full fruition of their friendship when Tony dies in Endgame.
Yeah.
Like, not to go too quick on a side tangent, but you can see like the 3 different relationships when Tony dies.
Yeah.
You can see like where their relationships are like at for all 3 of them. So the first one was Rhodey, right?
Yep.
First one was Rhodey. All he does is he puts his hand on Tony's shoulder and doesn't say a word. And he's because he at the end of the day, Rhodey is a soldier and they fight and they're friends, but he knows what Tony did because he knew what he had to do and he did it because he had to. Mm-hmm. And so he just looks at him, gives him a look of like, you done good. Like, oh man. Mm-hmm. And then you have Spidey that comes in. He's like just dying, crying. He's like hype. He's like, we did it. Like, no, we're good. Like, you can get up, right? Like, he's acting like a teenage, a kid, like seeing a father figure like die. And he's like, no, we're good. Like, he's seeing his hero die in front of his eyes. Mm-hmm. Then you have Pep, who just accepted it.
Yeah.
Was like, we're good now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can rest now.
Yeah.
Oh, it always
every
kills
time.
me.
Every time.
Every time.
So I think when you see that, you see how at least for me when I saw it, I saw like the whole like tenure of Rhodey and Tony's relationship across the whole MCU.
100% agreed. And so I didn't go too into the weeds with this. The Avengers, of course, they're all it's a by proxy thing because of Iron Man. Rhodey is exposed to all these other superheroes and heroes alike and personalities, but stand out 100%. Tony Stark is like his main man. Like he doesn't really have any other confidants that he like constantly and regularly is seen with, aside from I guess Sam now. Like that's the most that I've actually seen him interact with anybody that wasn't Tony. So it's an interesting balance there. So love interest. This one's gonna be a fun little miniature ride. So while Rhodey's romances are far and few between when it comes to the comic books, he had a couple that are worth mentioning. Kicking off with an honorable mention for a woman named Ray Lacoste. And so, long story short, she was a hairdresser that first dated Tony, and then she dated Rhodey. And but the interesting bit wasn't so much that route that she took as a character, but this character, Ray, in general, she was initially pitched to be the next Madame Mask, which is a character we've talked about in our Hawkeye episodes. And then they were like, oh, no, scrub that. We're going to make her Scott Lang's ex-wife.
Oh, my gosh.
And then they were like, scrub that. They never went anywhere with it. And then so she just eventually just falls out of the picture entirely, but it was an interesting backstory for her. She does not have an MCU counterpart, so whether or not we'll see her in Secret Invasion or Armor Wars, who knows? We'll see when we see, I guess. But a character that we are familiar with that we just recently covered in episode 51, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. So again, we're just going to rehash what we said there. Carol begun, pursuing Rhodey as far back as 2014 in the Captain Marvel series itself, in the comic books. Rhodey died in Civil War II, and then Carol and Tony went head to head as the new Captain, America versus Iron Man. The end game, no pun intended, is that it left Stark in a coma, and then he eventually died in that storyline. But like all great comic book characters, their relationship status seems to be a little bit in limbo. I don't think they've addressed it in recent years, or recent times at least. Whereas in the MCU, they've never addressed it at all. They don't seem interested in one another romantically. They've barely crossed paths in our Infinity War and Endgame films.
I remember that exchange though.
Yeah, that one exchange.
I remember.
That's
he
all
said,
they
"Hey,
had.
Supergirl, we're all about that super stuff too. Where were you? Where were you all this
I
time?"
love Don Cheadle, man.
There's a lot of other galaxies, universes out there. Unfortunately, they don't have you.
I know. Both of them had delivered those lines very crisp and it sounded so natural.
Yeah.
Even though they're talking about insane things.
Yeah.
Cosmic, But yeah, so doesn't seem to be any setup for them, which fine, that's fine. I don't think it needs to happen, to be honest. I think Rhodey is compelling as a character without a romantic interest. I think he's one of those rarities where you don't really have to dive into any of that. But I did want to cover one particular love interest that Rhodey had in the comics by the name of Marcy Pearson. So Marcy was Tony's West Coast public relations chief, who had a wealth of stake in the company after he died. So again, around 280 late 80s of Iron Man comics, he passed away. He seemingly passed away, left Rhodey all of his stuff. And I wanted to show you this page because it is truly one of the most ice cold pages I've ever seen in comic books. So Marcy was an important person in Stark Industries, and so throughout the entirety of Stark's death and how Rhodey was grieving, she was like, "You don't need to be CEO. I don't think you should take this job. You don't need it. Let me do it. Let me take the reins." And Rhodey was like, for a minute, he was like, "Okay, yeah, no, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right." And then I wanted to show you this. So cold, ice cold.
Yeah.
He calls her up in the middle of the night. And he just straight up is like, what does he say? He says, "Marcy, it's Jim. I've made up my mind. You're fired."
Oh my gosh.
He hangs up. And then he goes, "I'm starting to like this job."
Wow, that's insane.
Ice cold, just "You're fired." And so he leaves her be. So she, so unfortunately, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, right? So
of course.
What it comes down to is that after Rhodey's drop the mic moment, Marcy attempted to get revenge on him by, you guessed it, pinning Tony's death on Rhodey. So she started to pull together all this evidence and falsify this evidence to make it look like Rhodey killed him for the company, for the War Machine armor, all that stuff. And so later on, when it's revealed that Tony was actually in cryostasis, he gets on the horn with Marcy and he's like, "Hey, Marce, just want to have a talk with you. Come on into my office. I want to talk about this whole Rhodey thing." And she's like, "Oh yeah, about that." And it's funny because in the issue, in the narrative bubble, it's like moments and an insane a ridiculous ramble later.
Oh gosh.
So she's just like, "Oh
going
yeah,"
on,
and then,
yeah,
she's doing that thing, and then he just goes, Oh yeah, so how about you tell me about your relationship with, and then he just unfurls the entire thing that she tried to pull on him.
Wow.
And then he also doubled down and he's like, well, it's nice seeing ya. And then the FBI comes in. They take her away.
Wow.
She tried to kill him. So boom, she's arrested. No more Marcy. And so
That's crazy.
there's no MCU counterpart for this character. Kind of interested to see it, but there's no Tony.
Honestly, that's
now.
a great Armor War story.
It is, yeah, right. Like there's no Tony, right? But it is reminiscent of kind of like Dr. Ross, Agent Ross, and Val in a weird way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's kind of reminiscent of that, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if we see anything as far as romantic counterparts go. And then when it comes to adversaries, again, I didn't want to get too crazy on this because even still, all of the villains that we've seen Rhodey go up against are all Tony's folks that he just kind of gets looped into. So very quickly, Justin Hammer, portrayed by Sam Rockwell, who's fantastic in that role, also a candidate for Iron Man, right?
Is that Justin Hammer? Oh my god.
Whereas in the comic books, Justin was a British industrialist and direct competition to Tony Stark and Stark Industries, which was also referred to as Stark Enterprises, by the way, in the comics. Funny enough, Hammer was a big part of the story arc in the late 80s known as the Armor Wars, which I feel is like, it's kind of like an amalgamation of the... It pulls a lot of stuff from the films that we've seen already, and in the comics is very reminiscent of that. So like, again, with Easter eggs, right? They pulled all these different elements from Armor Wars in the books and put it into the films in one way or another. And so, yeah, again, Justin wasn't so much of an adversary as much as who he actually introduced, who is Ivan Antonovich Vanko, aka Whiplash, portrayed by Mickey Rourke. Again, another one of those actors where I'm like, oh yeah, they're in the MCU.
That's what I'm saying. They got like big name actors during that phase
They
1
really
going
did.
into 2. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Heavy hitter. And in the MCU, Whiplash was a Russian physicist and the son of a disgraced scientist by the name of Anton Vanko. He created his own arc reactor, pretty genius, and ultimately turned Hammer's own drones against him, as well as the War Machine suit, which I thought was pretty clever. I forgot he did that.
I loved Iron Man 2.
Yeah. It was really, really good. I remember, once again, as people always are, they were upset that he didn't look like he did in the comics.
I think that's like it's a broken record, you know?
It's
like
so...
no one ever looks like...
Yeah.
And if they did, jeez.
I know. And of course, it was based off of one character poster, and it was the one where it's Whiplash, and he just has the arc reactor, and then the what do you call them?
The things.
The Whiplash thing.
The whips.
People were upset that you could, like, he wasn't a full suit, which of course he gets later in the movie.
Yeah, because of he stole the technology.
Exactly. I was like,
Yeah.
It's the same. Short story is that it has not changed over the last 20 years. So in the comic books, he's a little bit different. He's got a little difference there. His name is Anton Igorovich Vanko, aka Whiplash. And he was instead a young Russian scientist whose village was invaded by someone weaponizing a stolen Iron Man suit. So his revenge in the comics is quite similar in that, like in the MCU, it was more like, oh, he killed my father, I want to kill him.
I mean, that's typical.
Yeah. And in the comics, it was like, oh, he ruined my village. And then he seeks to get revenge, and it wasn't Tony, but it trickles down. And then of course, Thanos, some dude named Thanos, by portrayed by Josh Brolin, and again, tale as old as time. He he gets grandfathered into this mess, and we all know what happened there. And so some other of War Machine's biggest adversaries in the comics who have made MCU appearances. Now, this is going to be a trip because like a lot of these characters either have phased out or they just haven't intersected. But these are some of War Machine's adversaries in the comic books, and they include Obadiah Stane, who's in the first film.
Yes.
The Mandarin, who is in the third film.
Yes.
Ultron. Eric Killmonger.
Wow.
Titania, which is a fun one. Norman Osborn. Ghost. And Kang the Conqueror.
Wow.
So, of those, I feel like Kang might be the standout, that potential, like he could go toe to toe with Kang at some point. But yeah, we'll see. As for other versions and in other media, so there are quite a few interesting variants when it comes to War Machine. In addition to James Rhodes, more than 10 different people have taken on the War Machine helm in alternate realities, including Tony Stark, Dum Dum Dugan.
That's hilarious.
Frank Castle. That one's a wild one. And even Thaddeus Ross. Thunderbolt.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Thunderbolt's all over the place in the comics, dude. Red Hulk. And then, of course, another man by the name of Parnell Jacobs temporarily took on the War Machine armor. The two of them, they actually had a relationship. They served in the military together, but Jacobs was discharged. He became a mercenary and then utilized the armor himself rather than sell it. So he was like, I'm going to take all these weapons. You know what? I'm going to keep that suit and I'm going to use it for myself. So yeah, we all know how that goes. And then as for animation, like I mentioned at the top of the show, he's been in a number of video games and animation, but the standout role for me was, he was played by the late, great James Avery in the 1993 animated series. Mm-hmm. Uncle Phil, not Uncle Carl.
There you go.
And then another version of Rhodey, which is of interest to mention, is the Rhodey of Earth 32938, appeared in What If Killmonger Rescued Tony Stark? We can't forget that one.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Don Cheadle voiced him there. And spoiler alert, What If is remarkably dark. So this Rhodey ended up dying along with T'Challa, killed by Killmonger and his initiative to pit America and Wakanda against
Killmonger
one
did not
another.
care in that episode.
Yeah, that episode blew my mind. I mean, they all did. Really.
Yeah.
They were all like, what is happening? But that one's messed up. I think Pepper was in it too, right?
Yes.
And she died too, right? Dark.
Before I move on to the future, I want to get this one note of Don Cheadle.
Yes.
Every time I think of Don Cheadle and it's not War Machine or Rhodey, it's Captain Planet.
Oh my God. Of all
Tell me you remember that.
I do.
Captain Planet.
Painful.
Oh my gosh.
Pain.
That is the best thing.
I mean, didn't it resurface like last year?
It did.
Too?
I think he did. I forget what interview it is, but he did the Don Cheadle breaks down his most iconic characters.
Yeah.
And I think Captain Planet was one of them. And he was literally like, yeah, like I don't know. It was kind of like this thing for Funny or Die.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't know what the script was. He thought it was a voiceover.
Oh, how funny.
At first, I think. And then he's like, nope, so you're going to get into this. And he's just like, yo, what? And then he was like, all right, I'll do it. I'm here, contractually obligated or whatever, I think.
Yeah.
And then it ended up just taking a life of its own. And it's
hilarious.
such an iconic thing.
It is. It really is.
Like, yeah.
I remember, I mean, not nearly as funny as that, but I very fondly remember him first from Hotel Rwanda. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah. I thought he was.
Didn't he win an Oscar for that?
I think he did. If not,
or
he
nominated.
Was definitely nominated.
Yeah, definitely nominated.
I thought he was absolutely fantastic in that movie.
He's been in the game a long time.
He really has. Yeah. So, I mean, like major props from the get-go from that guy. So when he joined the MCU, I was like, he's amazing.
Yeah.
So still glad to have him. But yeah, so speaking of the future of the character in the MCU, with Secret Invasion and Armor Wars in the horizon, I mean, shoot. So yeah, what do we think? Do we have any predictions? I have zero. Aside from the fact that maybe he's a Skrull.
Oh, God. It's like Spider-Man Far From Home all over again.
Yeah, exactly, right? Shoot.
I mean, obviously we know he's making a cameo appearance in there.
Yep.
Obviously we know Armor Wars is on the horizon of either filming or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget. I just hope we get to see him, kick butt in the suit again,
I agree, yeah.
and then, but also maybe have like an intricate story, that talks about him rather than just him fighting alongside people, but it's a story within him.
Yeah, like again, like 'cause,
Yeah.
like of all the characters that we've even discussed, like there's not much to
Yeah,
Rhodey's actual personal
Like we
story
don't
yet.
know, like we got Falcon Winter Soldier where we slowly figure out how the quote unquote death of Steve affects both of them. But how about we get like when we get out Armor Wars, like we slowly figure out like how the death of Tony is affecting Rhodey.
Yeah.
And then you can throw in I think Riri Williams
I was
supposed to
gonna
be
say, right?
so then it's like okay, like now it's like you're switching roles of like you had Tony mentoring Spidey, now you have Rhodey mentoring Riri, even though technically Riri's like the smarter of the two, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Not quote unquote, but she is technically.
Yeah.
But she's just super young. But like I think that would be like a cool like thing to play off of. But I think mostly trying to see like how the death of Tony is affecting Rhodey, because we haven't really tapped into that, and I think that'd be very beneficial for the character of Rhodey, and then expanding, Don Cheadle as War Machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Can't even top that. Not even a little. Ditto. And so I wanted to just feel like, note a fun fact about Armor Wars. So, I kind of mentioned it earlier. Armor Wars itself was a 7-issue arc within the Iron Man title, and it was cover dated 1987 through 1988 with issues 225 to 232. And so it's referred to as the Stark Wars. Stark Wars instead of Star Wars in the comic itself. And the premise is basically about an adversary named Spymaster who is revealed to have stolen Tony's precious Stark technology. And so the story itself includes Scott Lang, who Tony enlists to help him, as well as old pal Justin Hammer as a primary adversary. And Rhodey is not listed as a main player at all when it comes to Armor Wars. So it's kind of like a Civil War situation where it might bear some resemblance to the story, but other than the name of it, it might not really have anything to correlate with as far as the source material goes. But one of our favorite topics here on this show almost was. And so, tracking with many of the MCU's unexpected gems, it was revealed in 2021, very recently, that Anthony Mackie had even auditioned for the role of Rhodey as War Machine. And he didn't make the final cut, but 6 months later, he landed the coveted role of Sam Wilson, aka Falcon. So it's another one of the situations with like, you're not quite right for that one.
Yeah.
But we got something for you. Don't worry.
What could have been.
Yeah. And then lest we forget, Don Cheadle was given 2 solid hours to decide if he wanted to be Rhodey or not. After they decided to not move forward with Terrence Howard. Yeah. And then I was reading like more about it, and he was like, they phoned him and it was his kid's birthday party. So he was being dad at his kid's birthday party, and Marvel was like, so we'll give you 1 hour. And then he was like, yo, it's my kid's birthday. And they were like, we'll give you 2 hours.
Yeah.
Which is so wild to
It's
me.
insane, man.
Yeah, it's so wild. And then, of course, ultimately, thankfully, he accepted the role. I wonder if they would have gone to Anthony Mackie if he said no, but I guess
we'll never know.
Yeah. Some suggested reading. So, War Machine is definitely one of the characters I'm not so well versed in, but I can say that I did enjoy 2008's War Machine solo series by Greg Pak with artist Leonardo Manco and J. David Ramos. Related?
Nice. Maybe.
This story provides not only a look into cyborg Rhodey, as I mentioned earlier, but also a glimpse back at Rhodey's childhood origins, as well as, the Dark Reign arc that's included in that. we didn't go into it at all, but of course, growing up as a young black man, he experienced some unfortunate incidents in society, and he got bullied as a kid, and he always overcame everything, which was really admirable about the character. 2006's Civil War and 2016's Civil War 2, for obvious reasons. There's a lot going on both of those titles and arcs for all of the heroes, but especially Rhodey. He's pretty, integral to those storylines. And then, of course, you can't go wrong with the classics. So again, the original Iron Man runs, the old 70s through the 90s for more Rhodey. Especially, it's so interesting to see how he looked different during the different eras. Right?
Yeah,
like his first appearance, he was very traditional 70s look. And then by the 90s, he's got like a sick fade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they drew it in. Yeah, you got to love the decades. So that said, that's the end of the show.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, guys.
Woo!
Next episode, we got ourselves a traditional mini Marvel.
Oh, exciting.
So fun. So be sure to send us your questions or comments that you would like included in that. And then our next major character study after that is none other than the deadliest woman in the galaxy. Gamora, finally.
Who?
Gamora. Who is Gamora? Where?
Why?
A We're Groot salute to Sherry, Andrea, Jenny, Laura, Tyler, Ariel, Ed, Robin, Joliz, the Arachnid, Melanie, Katie, Andrew, Eve, Nats, Ashley, and Claire.
Woo!
Follow us on social, STRKCNTRST. And if you like what you hear, review, rate, and subscribe.
Once again, guys, thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the next one.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you Tony Stank?
Yes, this is Tony Stank. You're in the right place. Thank you for that. Never dropping that, by the way. Table for one, Mr. Stank. Please, by the bathroom.